Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today a review of a device which has definitely exceeded my expectations, the Bigme Hibreak Pro. So two things quickly before I start. Firstly, Bigme very kindly sent me this device for review. If you want more information about it, do check out the links in the description to this video. Those are affiliate links, so I do earn a small commission if you buy one of these using those links, which helps support the channel. The second thing I wanted to do is very quickly talk about what this is. So this is a smartphone, but it's a smartphone with an e-ink screen. So the same kind of screen that you get on a Kindle or other type of e-reader, a black and white screen that is very easy to read on, but doesn't necessarily have the same refresh rate as a normal smartphone screen. But apart from that, you can think about this as being a smartphone. It does pretty much everything you would expect a regular smartphone to do. So what I'm going to do in this video is talk about the device and give you my honest opinions of it. The first thing I'll talk about is who Bigme are. I'll then talk a bit about the design of the phone. I'll talk about what it is like using that black and white screen, what some of the limitations of the black and white screen are, but also what some of the benefits of it are. I'll give you my general impressions of how the device runs. I'll talk about some limitations with the device, and I will also answer some questions that I was sent both in comments on my previous unboxing video on this, but also on Reddit. I will be doing some follow-up videos to this one as well. So I'm going to do one where I go through all of the questions I got sent to me on Reddit, and I'm going to do another one where I talk about the experience of moving from being an iPhone user, which is what I was previously, to using this device. So let me start by talking about Bigme, because that may not be a name that's familiar to you. So Bigme are a Chinese company who make e-paper, e-ink devices, so e-readers, ink tablets and things like that. I've reviewed a number of their products on the channel before, including the previous version of the Hibreak Pro, the Hibreak. They make really interesting devices, and it's great to see companies trying something different with e-paper, making something that isn't just a Kindle-like device. So I've really enjoyed all of the Bigme devices I've used, but this one I think is the best thing they've produced yet. So let me talk very quickly about the specifications of the device then. So it's got a Dimensity 1080 processor inside it, which I found to be very fast in day-to-day use, very smooth. It's got 8GB of RAM and 256GB of onboard storage. It doesn't have a micro SD card slot, which some devices do have, but 256 gigs of storage is a decent amount. It's also got a 4,500 mAh battery inside it, and it supports 18-watt fast charging as well. So the battery life on this is good. It's definitely better than most smartphones. I'll talk a bit more about that as I go through my review. It's also got a 20 megapixel camera on the back and a 5 megapixel selfie camera. It's got 4G and 5G, so it's got a 5G modem inside it, which seems to perform exactly as you would expect it to, so really fast download speeds using that. It's running Android 14, so a very recent version of the Android operating system, and it's also got GPS, NFC and a gyroscope, so all the things you would expect a modern smartphone to have inside it. And the power button also has a fingerprint sensor built into it for security. Okay, let's talk about the design of the phone. So I think this has a fantastic look and feel. It's got kind of a retro sci-fi look to it. I think the white looks great and the red power button looks absolutely fantastic. The screen, whilst it's flush with the top of the phone, it actually sits a bit lower. So you can see there's a very slight gap between the surface you touch and the actual screen, but that's not a problem in use at all. And I really like the fact that they've included user mappable buttons on here. So you've got the volume buttons on one side of the phone along with the power button, while on the other side you've got two keys that you can map to various functions, which are really useful. So things like being able to refresh the screen or get into the e-ink center quickly is really helpful to be able to map those to buttons. In terms of size, it's very similar in size to the Boox Palmer or my iPhone 14 Pro Max, so that kind of size, but it's quite a bit lighter than the iPhone. Okay, let's get onto the screen, because that really is the selling point of this device. So it's a black and white e-paper screen. It's 6.13 inches, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's got 300 ppi resolution, so really crisp and clear. And the screen has a front light with both white and warm tones, which means you can adjust it to get it just right for the environment that you're using the phone in. But the real magic with this screen is the refresh rate. So Bigme have done fantastic work on that. It's got their super refresh technology, which goes up to 21 frames per second. So definitely not as high as you would get on a colour screen smartphone, but fantastic for any ink screen. What that means is things like typing and web browsing feel completely natural on it. It's also good enough to watch video on. So not the same sort of quality you would get watching on an iPad or something like that, but watching video on this does work. The fact that the screen is black and white does mean that there are some limitations. So Google Maps, for example, works absolutely fine, apart from the fact that because it's rendered in black and white, it's not quite as clear for navigation as it would be on a colour screen. It's an app that's designed to work in colour, so using it in black and white just doesn't work quite as well. And similarly, something like Wordle is very difficult to play on this phone because you can't tell whether your guesses were accurate or not. So moving on to more general impressions about the phone. I really like this phone. I've enjoyed using it enormously, to the extent that I was expecting to just use it for my review but keep using my iPhone. I've stopped using my iPhone completely. I'm now using this phone as my main device, and I expect that I will continue to do that. Because it's running Android, you can install whatever apps you want on it. So I've got all of my regular apps on here now. I use it for replying to YouTube comments. I use it for doing emails and things like that. You really can do whatever you want on this phone. One thing you probably wouldn't want to do, as I've said with my Wordle example previously, is play games on it. But aside from that, you really can do pretty much anything you would do on a regular smartphone. The typing experience is great. I've installed Gboard on here rather than using the inbuilt keyboard, and that works fantastically well. And I've found that my typing speed is just as good as it is on my iPhone. Because that high refresh rate, it's also good for browsing, so scrolling through web pages and things like that works very well indeed. And because it's an e-ink screen, it's really pleasant to read on. So both reading articles and things like that on web pages, but reading books on this is fantastic too. So I've got like the Kobo app installed on here and the Libby app, and the inbuilt reader app is very good too, especially with those user configurable buttons which you can use for page turns. In terms of battery life, I'm getting about 2 days at the moment, so that feels really pretty good for a smartphone. Maybe not great for an e-ink device, but bear in mind I am using it a lot at the moment, so I expect that may improve over time. Okay, moving on then to the less positive part of the review. So firstly, there are 3 things I wanted to call out that this phone doesn't have. None of these were a problem for me at all, but I thought it was worth mentioning. So the first one is it doesn't have a micro SD card slot, so comes with 256 gigs of onboard storage, but you cannot expand that. The second thing is it's not waterproof. So, you know, some modern smartphones have a degree of water resistance. This phone doesn't have any of that. And the third thing is that it doesn't support wireless charging. So as I said at the start, it does via its USB-C port support fast charging up to 18 watts, which works very well, but you can't wirelessly charge it. And then there are 2 features which don't currently work on the phone. So Bigme have told me that both of these are in the latest firmware update, but I haven't got that update through on my phone yet. So I will put in an update and let you know if I've got them through successfully. So those 2 things are tap to pay, so using like the Google Wallet to use your phone as a card in stores, and also Hey Google. So the phone has Google Assistant on it, but you can't have the phone like switched off and just say Hey Google to wake it up. But as I say, both of those things should be enabled in the latest firmware update. And then the other less positive thing I wanted to talk about is the camera. I'll put up some images here that were taken with the camera so you can make your own assessment of them. I think they're fine, but they're not great. Part of the problem is because you have to use the screen as a viewfinder, it can be quite difficult to frame your shots and see exactly what you're taking. You're certainly not going to get an impression of what the colours are going to be looking through the screen of the phone. So I think the photos the camera takes are okay, but it's definitely not as easy to use as a regular smartphone camera. So if camera quality is important to you, you may want to consider that. For me personally, it's definitely not an issue. Okay, moving on then, I wanted to answer some of the questions I've been asked, both in the comments on my unboxing video and also on Reddit. So I got a ton of questions. I am going to try and do a separate video where I go through all of the questions, but I thought I'd answer the most frequently asked ones now. So the first one was, can you install a custom launcher? So yes, you can. I've installed Nova Launcher on the phone. If you don't know, custom launchers allow you to apply kind of a different skin, a different look and feel to the phone. So I've got Nova Launcher on this one, and for the the most part, it works absolutely fine. I've had no significant problems with it. It works as it should do. Occasionally, I have had instances where it's slightly unresponsive. I don't get that when I'm using the stock launcher on the phone at all, so I think it is a Nova launcher issue rather than a problem with the phone. The second question was then, does it run Android Auto? So the answer to that is I don't know. You can install Android Auto on here. It seems to have all the settings and things like that, but I don't have a car that works with Android Auto, so I can't properly test that. But from what I've seen, I think that should work fine. And then the final question was around notifications. So can notifications kind of pop on the lock screen and things like that? Yep, everything in that regard works exactly as I would expect it to. So in wrapping up then, I would say I am hugely impressed with this phone. There are some limitations because of that black and white screen, and the camera is not great, but those are really the only problems with it. Aside from that, I absolutely love using it. I found it is much less distracting having this kind of e-paper black and white screen than it is having a full colour screen. And I will do another video where I talk about that. But I've found that I am much less inclined to pick this phone up and kind of randomly scroll through rubbish that I don't need to look at. It's a phone that I use, with purpose rather than using mindlessly. So I am really enjoying having this as my main phone. As I said, I've put aside my iPhone and I'm using this instead now. If you can live with those limitations, particularly with the camera limitation, and you like the idea of a more mindful phone, I definitely think this is something you should take a look at. As I said at the start, if you check out the links in the description to the video, you can find more information. And if you do use one of those links to order the phone, I will earn a small commission which supports the channel. Anyway, I will leave it there and say, as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.